And we are recording. This is the Kubernetes SIG network meeting for April 29th, 2021. Bridget, take us away with some issue triage to start off.
All right, fantastic. So let's take a quick look. We've got TCP Contract Entries. I think, Antonio, you were looking at this.
Yeah, this person reached out in Slack and I asked them to open the issue. It's a very specific scenario, and I don't know if I added my comment, but it would be good if more person look at that and can give an opinion. So in my opinion, it's a very specific scenario. I don't think that this can be generalized. But
Okay, do we want to accept this? Does anyone want it assigned to them? What do we want to do here?
Do we think that it's a bug, but that one that might not be fixable, or do we think that it's still needs investigation?
It's it's worth reading because it has a lot of nuances with contract and the setup that they have. So, in my opinion, is something that they can work around, and they have a very constrained environment. The thing is that the failures are legit because they are creating a contract entry is being renewed and is black holing the traffic. But I don't know to what point proxy should be, the in charge of deleting that contract entry.
Okay, so what do we think? Are we just going to leave this one for now? Are we going to take
I
any
would
steps
like
on it?
if Casey and Winship and you, some of you, take a look to that.
Okay.
Assign it to me and I can take a look.
Okay, sorry, username.
Oh, I'm Casey Davenport.
Couldn't remember the whole spelling.
That's the one.
And it auto completes anyway, of course. Okay, let's move on. We've got networking, V1 filling with a default path. Let's see.
Yeah, I was reading this one, Bridget. You can assign that to me, please.
Okay.
That's Ricardo. Thanks. R-I-K-A-T-Z.
I'm just spelling it wrong.
Yeah.
R-I-K.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. This one was interesting because it's like, well, it's a feature request. We had Antonio saying that it was related to Dualstack,
Yeah, the guy opened a cap and I added to your Dualstack point in the agenda.
Yep. Okay. Do we want to accept triage on this or assign it or do anything else with it?
I think that we should accept.
Okay.
I think it's triage accepted.
Yeah, it's the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah. Accepted past tense. I guess we'll find out. Hey, look at that. Okay, he'll check. Let's see. Antonio, you were all over everything. Right.
He said that he's going to close.
Yeah. So you think it might be SID Cloud Provider? Should we take SIG Network off of this?
I'm watching this, so let it ride during 2 weeks because I think that is a problem with his setup or some configuration.
Okay.
But
all right. So should we just leave this one?
Yeah.
Okay. this one, I was looking at this earlier, and it sounds like people want this person to test with a more recent version because it's so old. And yeah, Dualstack has obviously been a work in progress. And if they're testing on Kubernetes 1.17, I can't imagine that that would go well.
Yeah, I have commented that we have had many of these in the past, and I would like to see if we can have the same problem in 1.21, because
Right.
otherwise, even if we find it, it will not be fixed because it's an alpha feature.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, it's in beta as of now, but like certainly back in 1.17, there's nothing from that even it still exists in the code base, I think. Like that was a giant rewrite. So
shall we wait
Okay.
and see if they can repro on 1.21 in the next 2 weeks and then close
Yeah.
it if not?
sounds good. Okay. Ooh, we've got user space kube proxy problems on Windows. It looks like I think it's an endpoint slice proxying feature gate that may or may not work well with kube proxy. What do we think?
I think they have a PR for fixing this in somewhere.
Mhm. Well, I don't know if that, well,
Oh,
not,
actually, wait a minute. Scroll back to the top.
that's not SIG Windows. That's a VMware Tanzu. Yes.
So there was something where, yeah, assign this to me. I think this is already fixed. That's Dan Winship. We were trying to force both the Linux and Windows user space proxies to use endpoint slices, even though they don't have endpoint slice support. So I think this just got fixed.
Yeah, I think I saw that mentioned in a different issue too. So, okay. This person didn't, they need to give us more information. Like, yeah, they didn't tell us the cloud provider or anything. So I guess that one sits for another period and then we'll see.
Yeah, you can assign that one to me if you'd like. I'll at least read
Okay.
through it.
Sorry, I just closed it, but I will reopen it. It was this one, I think.
Yeah.
And that was, sorry, I can only
Uh,
sort of see who's speaking. I think it's
sorry.
Casey.
Yeah, that's Casey.
Okay. Zoom likes to move around where all the faces are for whatever reason. So I'm kind of going by voice. Okay. Conformance tests.
Yeah.
You made this, Antonio. What do you want us to do?
Accept it. There is one person working on that. The problem is that this conformance test is not testing the data plane, so only test the API. And maybe Kubernetes works, but the CNI or whatever is implemented in the services is not working and the test pass.
Okay. And so then it looks like maybe this pull request needs some attention. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm working with this person. He's a new contributor and he's trying to
Awesome.
fix it.
Do you want this assigned to you or and you
No,
created it? So
assigned to him. Yeah,
oh no, it's assigned to him. That's right. Okay. Awesome. Moving right along. Tim opened this one. There's been some discussion on it. Oh, and we accepted triage an hour ago. You can see I loaded this up a little bit ago. So I guess we're okay there. No local DNS cache. Oh, it's always DNS. Let's see, where are we at here? So,
You can assign this to me. I can take a look.
okay. I'm like, we're making updates to
Yeah.
118 now. That's all right. And what is your username?
P Ramesh J. PRAM.
Right. Cool.
M. Yeah, that one. That's fine.
Everyone would assume people's like Zoom and GitHub are the same, but all All right. Let me know when we're running low on time. But we've got pod readiness, various IP families. Ooh. Oh, this one is, one of those up for discussion between Cal and Antonio.
And I have my opinion, but my opinion is not the good. Dan Winship and all the others should. This is something that to work for the Dualstack GA. We need to fix this. I added
Okay.
to the agenda.
Do we want to triage accept this?
Yeah, I think we have this.
I mean, we're gonna deal with this. So. Okay, and we've got an update. Ooh, go client. Ooh. All right, we've got. This is interesting. So is this dealt with or?
So there's two things here. Both kubedns and IP mask agent have to update. I did the kubedns part. I'm trying to find someone that can update IP mask agent. So yeah,
Okay.
It is a bug
Thank you.
or like cleanup.
All right. Does somebody want to raise their hand for IP mask agent?
What do you need to do in the IP mask agent?
I think we need to build a new image that uses a higher version client Go. I know Varun was one of the owners. I'm trying to see if there's somebody else familiar with it. Yeah, but if someone wants to take it from the group here, it's open too. But we need to build a new image and update it with the new client Go.
If not, you can add the help wanted and these things. There's a lot of people, asking for new tasks. If you think that it's easy for a new person to take.
Okay.
I should be able
let's
to
see.
squeeze a client Go update in the next week or two. So you could assign it to me too.
All right. That's that.
Cool. Thank you.
And we can do one more, Bridget.
One more. Okay. And we're on flaky tests. The ever popular.
This is going on now, the discussion in SIG testing. There is.
Yeah, so.
I accept that. And you can assign to me.
Okay.
So well, it's working, Benjamin, and the SIG testing.
Absolutely. Okay, I will assign that to you and I'm going to stop my share at this point.
Great. Thank you very much, Bridget. So I think the first item on the agenda is the all ports cap.
Yep, I added that item. Let me present my screen 1 second. Okay, yeah, mostly wanted to start the discussion here to see what path to go down further to move this forward. So the work in progress step is quite short right now. The motivation to do all port services is that we have many applications in the VoIP and RTP space that require several ports to be exposed by a single service, and listing all those out can be tedious. So we're trying to see if we can export the entire port range, the valid port range, through a service just by setting a simple field, a Boolean field on the service spec. So that's how we initially started this proposal. So what I have here is just a single field, all ports Boolean on the service API, service port API, and it needs to be on the service port API because we don't want to break the validation. So currently any valid service requires at least one port to be specified except if it's headless. So to keep that same validation going, we wanted to introduce this field in the service port spec. But through the reviews, we actually got some interesting alternatives. So yeah, one idea was to create a brand new service type, so we don't have to worry about breaking existing validation there. And this could just be a load balancer at the IP level. So all ports, all protocols would be supported. That's one idea. It's a pretty major change to the API plus validation, but yeah, it's cleaner in that we won't break anything existing. And if you want load balancers, we need load balancer controllers to implement this new service. Extending this is that this could instead be a gateway, L4 gateway implementation rather than the service API. So that's one option. But this is like a bigger change and possibly longer term option. The other option that we got out of the reviews, and I think this is pretty interesting too, is restricting all port support to just load balancers and to just headless service. As mentioned before, headless services don't require you to specify a port. So we get that 0 port validation step for free, right? Since they are already allowed in headless service. The only validation we'd have to open up is load balancer services can now also be headless. Right now it checks that you have a valid cluster IP, but if we open this up, we could relatively easily allow this support. So I wanted to bring up this here to see, is there any major concern with opening it up like in the option 2? Should we just wait for option 1? Yeah, that's it.
I have a question, Cal here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan to deal with the node port specifically for load balancers? So load balancers today use node port for health checks and all of that stuff. So
correct. Yeah, that's a great point, and that's true that it wouldn't make sense to do node ports when you're trying to do an all ports service to open everything up. So if we did the headless service plus a load balancer, there wouldn't be any node port assigned except for health check for traffic policy local. And that would still continue to work as it did, but you would not be able to access you would not do any port translation. Like this node port actually translate to this service, this backend port. We wouldn't have that functionality at all. We would just have the node port for the health check if needed. But yeah, that's it. The node port functionality would just not be there.
So that's the implication on the way proxy works, right?
Correct. Yeah, on all of these changes, you're right that we would have to make changes to proxy. You would have to make changes to the API validation and to the load balancer controllers to pick up this option.
Yeah. Go ahead, Antonio. I can wait.
Yeah, there is a feature now in load balancer that you can disable the node port allocation.
Correct. Yeah, that's a field in the load balancer. I put that somewhere in the KEP as well. But yeah, you can disable it. But I mean, if you don't even have a valid service port entry, then there is no node port to be assigned anyway. That is if we use this option, right? With headless, where you don't specify ports at all, then there's no need to disable node port allocation. But yeah, in my original proposal where we had that single valid port, if you still wanted to skip it, you could do it with, I'm trying to find where I put that. But I mean, yeah, it's somewhere in there that you can set the field to say disable node port allocation or whatever that is called.
So
yeah, this one.
I just want us to understand the implication of what we're trying to do here. If we are to to not do port translation, which I believe we shouldn't, because you cannot lock all the ports of a node. We're basically saying this type of services is only supported by DSR. The direct server response. That's the only way people can expose a service like that. They cannot expose it using any other way, which is fair, by the way. I just want us to document this, because there is no way, there is no ports on the node, right? I'm gonna deliver the packet to the node using the original public IP that I received the packet on, and that's DSR.
It's not directed to the cluster IP.
That's not right. That has nothing to do with cluster IP, because cluster IP is not known by load balancers. Load balancers doesn't know that your service web. It knows the public IP that it listens on. So the way direct server response today works is a packet received on a, say, PIP, right, public IP on the load balancer. Then it's forwarded to the node using the same destination IP, just a different MAC, right? And that's one of the ways you can make a service today. The other way is you do map ports, like you, for this IP, this port goes to this node port, all right? So we're not gonna do no ports, so we're only saying the services of type whole ports of all ports services are only, cannot support load balancers except DSRs. Which again, I'm saying it's a fair point, it's a required point, we just need to document. Right?
Yeah, that I agree. That's a good point, and I think there are some load balancer implementations that do just that today, like DSR. The nodes accept packet destined to the load balancer WIP, and the response goes from the backend pods directly to the requester,
to the client. Yes, which is fair.
So that's okay.
Yeah. The other point I wanted to ask about is you're talking about headless service as a load balancer. I am not sure I understand that. So can I ask you to elaborate?
Sure.
If you scroll, yes.
Could I take it? I made a suggestion. If we extend the headless service, I believe is a good candidate because it removes many of these questions that are raised in this forum. For instance, DSR is not needed at all. You can have address translation to the pod address and have the same thing basically as today, but for the entire IP range or the entire IP address actually. And to limit it to headless also removes the need for an extra port that isn't needed and have to be there, which is very hard to document in an understandable or sane way. You do not need a port and it's not used, but you have to write it there. It's weird. But to like interpret a headless service with a load balancer type as the same as it is today internally, but externally you will get all the traffic from that IP, the load balancer IP to that particular pod. I believe it's simple to implement, and for me at least it's intuitive. The problem I would like to see is if these stakeholders need this to be the same thing for cluster IPs, because that they won't have.
So, okay, I understand where you're coming from, Lars, and it makes sense, but I want to bring your attention to 2 points, right? With load balancers, if you said, okay, we're going to limit this to only headless service, meaning there's no cluster IP, all right, you're basically assuming that the load balancer, which is an external entity to the cluster, knows how to route to pod IPs, right? Not only that, you are forcing people to the cloud provider controller or whatever we call it now to respond, to react to pods coming in and out of the load balancer. meaning the selector, let's say selector chose 3 pods today, tomorrow is 4, then it needs to know the 4th and then go and configure the load balancer. And God knows there are so many state issues. I can bring your attention to graceful delete and all the problems we had there. All right. The problem with this also is the idea of pod IP, which limits this implementation to networking CNIs that are allocating from the same network where the cluster lives. So on Azure, for example, it's Azure CNI. On GCP is going to be GCP CNI. On AWS, it's going to be AWS CNI, and so on. That means anybody who's using NCAP, DCAP style or VXLAN or any of those intelligent implementation, right, won't be able to fit a load balancer on top of a whole port load balancer on top of this implementation, because the load balancer doesn't know pod IPs, doesn't know how to route pod IPs. So I want to bring your attention to that. Yeah.
I know it sounds like there's a coupling between cluster IP and external load balancers, but is that a strictly, because I thought cluster IP was only an internal within the cluster notion.
There is no coupling between cluster IP and load balancer.
The coupling is that load balancer services are assumed to also be cluster IP services, but the load balancer doesn't know about the cluster IP.
Yeah. It doesn't route to traffic to cluster IPs. Yes.
Right, but what you were saying just now is that actually it is required. I'm just trying to understand.
So okay, let's take a headless service that has pods backing it. How would we do load balancer in this case? External load balancer, external to the cluster.
I guess it's sort of, the way I saw this proposal was that it's not a headless service per se. It's that we are using, giving this combination of settings, which happens to right now to be headless, another meaning, as opposed to just being invalid. Which is separate from the implementation and how it will get done.
That's correct, Bowie. It's just that right now it's an invalid combination, but yes, we are giving it a different meaning and restricting exposing all ports to just that combination. And if I recall right, the kubeproxy rules that would be set, if the load balancer had both a load balancer IP as well as a cluster IP, would be to send both IP matches, destination IP matches to the same chain, which essentially load balances between the backend pods. So I'm not sure whether or not cluster IP being present is going to break existing scenario.
Okay, in that case, it makes more sense. Let me just carry on this point. But the assumption here is I will never access the service from the cluster, right? Am I getting it correctly? Like if I want to access this service from the cluster on the load balancer, how would I do that without external load balancer?
You could still access the load balancer IP from within the cluster. The proxy rules would still work.
Yeah. I am saying if I don't have an external load balancer, and I want to
this does have a hole where you can't define cluster IP all ports, I think. Cal, that's what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's we are victims of our own API, by the way. It's really
But you can access the service from within the cluster using the load balancer address instead of the cluster IP.
True.
That would still work.
True, but today, as a user today, I'm able to access a load balance service inside my cluster without dependency on any external component such as load balancer. All right. Tomorrow.
No. For most bare metal clouds and non-cloud provider clouds, that's the reality. You have no external load balancer. You have a router with ECMP and you use the load balancer address directly because kube router is or kube proxy is routing the load balancer IP.
I think I wasn't clear. Let me repeat that and try to be more clear. If I have a service today, a cluster IP service, I can access it from the cluster on the cluster IP, right? And I get load balanced across all the backing pods. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes. Now, if I move to the future, what we're telling users are, yes, you're gonna have that, but if you chose to go with a whole port service, the only way you can route the whole port service within a cluster is by an external load balancer or by some other means like running some load balancer on top of your cluster.
Yeah,
No.
you're right. So something needs to configure that external load balancer IP in order for you to even use it and access the pods. If that's the concern you're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but as soon as you have
So guys,
configured it using Metal LB or whatever, it will work.
Yeah, but
I'm just saying it's additional deployment.
Yeah, that's what
sounds like there's a
Kyle is
lot
saying.
of discussions still to have here, and I'm aware that we have a few more agenda items to get through. But there is a PR linked in the notes, so I suggest we take the rest of this to the KEP and hash it out there.
Sounds good.
But
Thank
you everybody for the input.
Yep, thanks everyone.
Bridget, you're up next.
Yep, mine's very short. We would like to move Dualstack to stable, which means we need to take a look at issues and we have to look at PRs and we have to see what needs to be done now and what can be done later. Please add, you don't have to read them aloud right now. Please add links to any of your favorite enhancements or bug reports or things that are in your mind blockers to Dualstack going to stable. That's all. We will talk about this again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. That was nice and short. Ricardo and James, do you like to talk about engineering progress?
Yeah, that's thank you, Casey. That's just a follow-up. So we had our first Ingress in Nginx sub-project meeting this week, and it started really good. Bowie helped us a lot with the moderating thing. James, I've asked James to come here because James has proposed to be somehow some sort of not maintainer, but help us with the issue triage and doing all of those administrative and other things as well, and also taking a look into the code. And yeah, we are just getting traction, but I just wanted this to also to present you, James. And James, if you want to say something about what do you think about the project and how it's going. We are not going to deprecate yet Ingress in Nginx, at least, folks.
That is not my goal. So hi, everyone. So as Ricardo said, I'm James Strong. I'm interested in helping out and just making sure that things are moving along since there hasn't been a lot of traction. So just going through the issues like Bowie suggested, just getting an understanding of the state of the world and what I can do to help and learn how to help be a contributor as well, and just getting up to speed with the project itself. So from a technical perspective, that's really all I had. Just trying to find a way to help be part of the community a little bit more than just writing documentation.
Awesome. Thank you, James. Really appreciate you stepping up to help out there.
No problem. I'm sure I'll have lots of questions.
Well, hopefully among us, we will have lots of answers.
Awesome. Thanks.
Antonio, you wanted to talk about 122?
Yeah, well, this is more for you, Casey, Dan, and Tim.
So.
This release you have work, and there are, I think, 20 caps. I think that 3 or 4 are stale, but this time you are the ones that need to go to the tracking sheet and add the caps that are going to graduate.
Yeah. So I noticed that note. This time around, we need to, at the beginning of the cycle, put into the spreadsheet the KEPs that we intend to complete for the release. So I think the main thing there is they need to have somebody who's committed to driving those through in this cycle to whatever target state they are. So what I was going to propose, it looks like the deadline is the evening of our next meeting. Just gonna put my head together with Tim and Dan, but also ask everybody in the SIG to reach out if you're planning on progressing a KEP in this cycle so that we can add it to the list. And so that I can make sure I've got like the owner for each of those things properly.
Yeah, that's the other thing is the people with KEPs that doesn't feel that is going. Maybe last time we didn't get the one that was working. That I don't remember the name, the local policy or something like that. So if somebody needs help, I mean, I can help with some of the camps. I know people that is wanting to help. So just. I don't know, send an email or something asking for help, and we'll see if we can graduate more features in this release.
Yep.
Maybe a useful call to action is for that search. If you see one of your KEPs in there and you haven't updated it lately, now would be an awesome time to go update it with your current plans and intentions.
Yeah, for sure. I think that right after this, I may send out a thread on the mailing list so that folks can just respond to there with their intentions. So here's my KEP and here's me saying that I want to do it. And then we can chat through all of those on the next meeting. And then I'll fill in that spreadsheet between 2 p.m. and midnight the next meeting's Thursday. But yeah, thanks, Antonio, for shouting out about that, because that was a change that was otherwise going under the radar. Great. So I think the next item was from Andrew.
Yep. So if everyone doesn't know me, I'm Andrew. I've been helping run the network policy API subgroup meetings, and after a lot of discussion, we kind of came to the conclusion that we need a new repo, kind of like the Gateway API, in order to house some of our work, such as cluster scope network policy and whatever else we're working on, maybe a V2 and other things. So I just wanted to put this issue out there. I open to do that. I requested review from Tim, Dan Williams, Casey, and Antonio. And I also started a thread in the Google group for people who have any comments about this or any other additional ideas. So yeah, I just wanted to open the floor there.
Great. Well, it looks like 36 minutes ago, Tim gave it a thumbs up. So
yep,
you're probably pretty good to go.
Great. Yeah. And if anyone's interested in working on network policy stuff, come to the meetings on Monday. We're starting to ramp up a lot of things. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And then back to Antonio for the last item.
Well, I didn't see Robert, but it's Bowie and other people. So congratulations. I think that you are going to the 0.30 release, no? That's alpha something. Bowie?
Anybody?
Any Gateway API people?
Oh, sorry. I was walking my kid home. Yes, we are cutting 0.30.
And that's, I mean, can we start using it?
Yeah, actually, if you go to the page, there's a number of implementations, and they have links to instructions.
Ah, cool.
There's like
I
6 or 7 providers, I think. So you can go and check it out.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations.
Oh, it's not just me, it's everyone else. I'm trying to see if they're on this call.
Well,
Looks like
everybody
Rob is
on the
not
call.
here.
Congrats. That is the end of the agenda, though, unless there are any last-minute items. The rest
We
of
will
it's
send an
pretty
announcement on the SIG mailing list. Good reminder.
cool. Well, I think everybody gets about 15 minutes back then. Keep an eye out on the mailing list for that KEP thing that I'm about to send. I'll see you all next time.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
So folks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.